should say that the only reason, not the only reason, but let's say the impulse for me to be interested at all came out of my graduate work in immunology, because I had gone through 7 years of graduate work, and I had learned quite a bit, of course. But I also realized that the study of immunology that I had experienced didn't really tell me how to restore health to my patients. It told me how things could go wrong, but it didn't really help me to understand. So I was still looking for some kind of an answer. And when I read a book about homeopathy, it sort of triggered the thought, this really sounds like what I've studied to some degree. I mean, it's not the same, but it sounded similar in a way about stimulating the immune system, and I'd like to learn more about it. So I had the idea then that I should experience it myself. So I set up an appointment with a practitioner. I knew nothing about how it should be done, really. And I didn't know much about this practitioner. And this particular one, it turns out, as I learned, really wasn't the mainstream homeopath. He had his own methods of using a pendulum to find the remedy and so on. But he gave me this remedy to repeat, a high potency remedy. And I had such a strong reaction, I ended up in bed for about a week. I couldn't eat. I lost 15 pounds. I couldn't even watch TV. I was so sick.
Right. And
so I didn't get better, but I certainly was impressed.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you never questioned at that point whether it was, sugar pills that couldn't affect your vital force, you had clear experience firsthand that they were powerful medicines.
Yes, and it was what's called a high potency medicine. In other words, it was well beyond any physical substance. And I can assure you that I was not expecting to get sick like that.
Sure.
I was thinking that if anything, I'd feel better.
Yes, or maybe nothing at all.
Or nothing at all.
Right.
But certainly I didn't expect to get as sick as I did.
Sure.
So just to explain that a little more, I understand that wasn't really the best medicine for me, and that I shouldn't have taken it so many times as I did. This fellow had me taking it every 3 hours for 2 days.
Oh, goodness.
A high potency remedy.
Wow.
So it just made me sick.
Sure.
I had too much of it.
Sure.
Referring back to what I said earlier about how Dr. Hahnemann discovered Medicines Act, and that they act to stimulate the body's natural healing abilities. In other words, if you give a drug, as we usually think of drugs, they have a physical effect or a chemical effect on the body. They slow down the intestine, they stop the itching, if it's a steroid or whatever, because it acts on that level. The homeopathic remedies do not act like that kind of drug. They act on a different level, as I said, an energetic level. And what they do then is they harness, if you will, or stimulate the healing abilities that are in the body. Now, let me give you an example of the difference. Let's say a simple thing would be, let's say that you had an injury, say a cut in your arm. And of course, then as a result, the cut is going to get somewhat red and swollen and painful as part of the healing process. That your body will go through a healing, and as it goes through healing, it will go through different stages, form a scab, and so on, until it finally grows new skin. So that's the natural healing that has to occur, regardless of whatever method you use. There has to be a healing.
Yep.
The homeopathic method will enhance that process and make it happen faster and shorter. The conventional drug treatment will use drugs to counter that. So, for example, applying ice to stop the inflammation that's there, even though the inflammation is part of the healing. Using an anti-inflammatory drug, using a drug to stop any feeling of discomfort or pain, which seems like a good thing. But what it's doing is it's interfering with the healing process of the body. Does that make sense, that contrast between the two?
It does.
All right, so now we go into practice. A veterinarian takes training in homeopathy. They may or may not understand the difference that we just talked about. So some veterinarians will be interested in homeopathy enough to really seriously study it, realize that it's a way of using medicines, and orient their practice that way. And they can have a practice where they offer homeopathy, maybe along with nutrition or chiropractic or something like that, but they're using homeopathy in the way we've discussed. It's also possible for a veterinarian not to either fully understand that or to accept the idea that that's the way it works.
Right.
And what they'll do then is they'll incorporate homeopathy in their practice, and they'll combine it with, say, the use of drugs or use of other measures that run counter to the homeopathic effect. So it's possible then that the animal could receive two treatments, one of which is stimulating healing, the other is trying to slow it down.
Sure, sure.
So it is confusing to the public.
Yeah, and confusing to the body as well. Yeah,
it's confusing. Well, yeah, they don't get the same. They don't get the same. Well, they certainly don't get the homeopathic effect we're talking about. They may get better gradually because of all the things that are being done.
Sure.
But you're not really using homeopathy as it is intended. Now, when I say as intended, I mean to say more like it was developed originally, and it has been more understood over the last 200 years.